Hello, everyone. Welcome to the TIMEOUT Podcast. I'm your host, Ari Bruckman. Joining us this week, our special guest is Charlotta Barman. Charlotta, thank you for taking the time to join us this week.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Ari, for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here.
Just so our audience has a good understanding of kind of your background, growing up in Scandinavia, talk a little bit about what that culture was like. We learned a little about you and kind of some of your beliefs at that point.
Of course. Well, as you mentioned, I was brought up in Scandinavia, but I did actually move away when I was in my late teens. So as a 19-year-old, I left Finland, which is where I was brought up, and I moved temporarily to New Zealand. I was staying there for a year, but I actually ended up just staying out in the world for a very long time until 3 years ago. So I was away for like 12-ish years. But for the time, like to answer your question, like what I experienced Finland to be like at the time, I come from a very open-minded, free-flowing family, but still the society around me at the time was I felt like it was very constricted. And as a teenager already, I started recognizing that I really longed to be out in the world and feel more liberated and more free and a lot more spaciousness, because also I was brought up in a very small town, which I've actually returned to now as an adult. But as a teenager, I found that very difficult and challenging. I found the small town syndrome to be very rife as a teenager. Like everyone knows everybody, and that came with these challenges. And I just couldn't wait to get away. And now as an adult, I appreciate it in a different way.
What were some of those things, if you wouldn't mind sharing to go a step further there, that you thought were limiting you at the time? Maybe you didn't realize they were limitations, obviously, hindsight being 2020 now down the road,
Yeah.
but some of those things that kind of first came to mind for you that you said, something might not be right about this.
Well, there were a couple of bigger things actually. If I take it like on a professional side of things, I already knew since I was the age of 5 that I wanted to be a flight attendant at the time. And I didn't really recognize that the airlines here in Finland were the right ones for me. And also here, the Scandinavian airlines, they have an age limit like for the when you can apply of 23 years old. And as I mentioned, I left the country when I was 19, and I was already ready at that point to go and live out my dream and do the thing I wanted to do. So I didn't go to New Zealand to be a flight attendant, but I did go to spread my wings in the sense of like actually trying to like create that spaciousness for myself. But then I did find an airline which accepted 21-year-olds in the Middle East, and I actually moved to the Middle East to work with them for 5 years, which was amazing. So that was like one of the things, the limitations I found. Like I didn't have the platform to do the work I wanted to do, and I really saw that really early on. And of course, at a later age, I could have done it I could have worked as a flight attendant with a Scandinavian airline, but it didn't feel as appealing anymore, having lived the 5-star airline dream in the Middle East. It didn't feel as appealing to do the shuttling here in Scandinavia anymore. So once I was done, and that was great. The other thing that really was a huge struggle, I know that we talked previously before about some challenges as well, like off this podcast. And for me growing up, I didn't feel a sensation of belonging here with the culture, with the people. I was bullied. I didn't really fit into any crews. I had singular friends, at different times in my life, but I didn't really have like a group of people. And a lot of the people in my schools, being a small school, they were all in cliques together, and I didn't really feel like I fit in. And that was also partly my choice. Like I didn't resonate necessarily with the mentality at that time, and I don't always now as well, but I can really appreciate it. But there, I did have that longing of having a group of friends that were my group of friends. So I recognized that I also had that longing, and I didn't really find that here. So as I mentioned, I did have some singular friends who I'm still friends with now, and that's beautiful. But that was also a huge driving force for me to actually leave, because I didn't have that sensation of this is my home.
Yeah, I've talked about this on other podcasts. Labels are a really interesting thing, right? When you talk about cliques, it's interesting when you go back and you think, where did this idea first start? Was this almost a seed planted right before, when you're kind of going through and you're growing up and you're saying, oh, okay, this is a boy's toy, this is a girl's toy, this is that, right? So there's that whole idea behind kind of being led, right, to believe, well, oh, this is what's available to me, right? And
Yeah.
that's not available to me because, I think it's between the ages of 0 and 5, you learn the most about what's available to you and what's not. So, at a young age, once you start questioning those things, I think it's even more unique that as you got older, you started to realize, hold on, because it's harder, right? The longer you've been in that sense of programming and having that ideology, it's harder to come back from that. What was it
It
for
is.
you? I know that there was a time in your mid 20s where you were in a tough relationship. I think you referred to it as even toxic. Just doing some research, but what made that toxic, and what was that deciding moment for you that you said you deserve more, and kind of wanted to go down this path?
Mm. Thank you for bringing that up. I mean, there were a lot of different factors. And I think in the very actually recent half a year, in this past half year, I've done even more processing on that. So I do find, and I've had a lot of conversations with friends around this as well, who are experiencing similar things, that there's a lot of healing in conversation and connection, I find. And even though this relationship is one that I left 4 years ago almost now, I still carry some of the wounds, and I do feel like I've integrated a lot of my lessons and I've done a lot of the things, but I did recognize even like half a year ago, or even maybe 3 months ago, that I did carry some of that anger towards this particular person. Currently, what I recognize now is that I am the one who is in control of my own emotions. And this is something that I've known for a very long time, but I didn't recognize that this was one of the aspects where I'm actually placing blame. And for many of the aspects within this relationship, I have over time recognized that I was also an active participant in this relationship, but even more so, like, it's kind of landed in a different way in this last half a year, that actually I was a very strong part of this relationship. Of course I was there. I was allowing these things to be around me. I was allowing and choosing to be in that place. So it's been a very interesting last few years. I mean, there was a long time in these 4 years that I didn't pay much thought to it, but I've done a lot of healing in the last year specifically, and this has been one of the things that I've really healed from. But to go back to that relationship, what makes it toxic, as you were asking, many things. I didn't really know what my visions were. I had left my dream job of flying, I've left that, and I've moved to London, and I moved to LA, and I didn't really have like a clear path. I had a lot of voices from myself telling me all these things that I wanted to do. And I had a lot of voices externally telling me what I should and shouldn't be doing. And I was very confused as a person. And naturally bringing that into a relationship as well with another person who's very strong-headed and also has a lot of their own issues, I would like to say. I mean, without placing blame, we all have our own stuff. Just the match wasn't necessarily the most healthy. So I do feel like we did really bring out a lot of bad traits within each other, and we brought a lot of bad things into the relationship, and I feel like that's really what made it toxic. But I have to say again, like, for the longest time, I placed a lot of blame towards the person.
I want to stay with that for a moment, because it's something I find really, really, really interesting, right? When we're talking about relationships in general, whether it's a friendship, whether it's an intimate relationship, whatever the case may be, there's a sense of accountability that you took. I think that's extremely, extremely powerful, right? Because you realize you regain that power. As soon as you place the blame on someone else, you relinquish the control that you had over the situation to make a change, because you're telling yourself, this is what it is. There is no moving forward, because you can't control that other person. You're telling yourself there's nothing you can do, right? And it's just them. Then it's really hard for you to change the way you're living and have a different result. Tell me, do you believe, after now working with a ton of women and you yourself, do you believe that you can move on, be happy, and not enter another relationship with that same anger without taking that sense of accountability?
I believe you can move into a new relationship, but I definitely think that you do want to learn your lessons and like see where you fit into that whole thing. Because I think if you want to have a successful and a healthy relationship, and I mean successful in the sense that it's a healthy, beautiful relationship where things happen, but you can manage them and you can work through them. Because we have to remember, we're two in a relationship. Traditionally, we are two people with a lot of emotions, a lot of previous experiences, a lot of programming from society and from our own lessons and from our own perspectives. And I think it's really important to recognize where you have been actively participating and where you have been placing blame elsewhere. So without recognizing that, I feel like it's very difficult to create a new, healthier relationship and a new scenario for yourself.
What do you think is the most important part when you change your mindset, right? What was that switch for you where you said, you know what, maybe it was the accountability part, but maybe it was just also realizing you deserve more. You weren't going to wait for that other person in the relationship. And whether it's male or female, how do you kind of detect what's that stopping point? Because you don't want to quit now, right? We have Tinder, we have Bumble, we have all these dating apps. Everything's at our fingertips. So if we leave as soon as it's just really easy. First conflict comes up, right? First bad discussion or first argument, boom. You don't have to tolerate it. There's so many more options at the disposal of our fingertips. How do you kind of get past that and say, you know what, this is still part of the growth process?
I think that's a really beautiful question. I think it's really important to go into the situation, whether it's at the beginning of the relationship or at the time of that conflict or at the time of that potential for growth together, to recognize, well, what are my desires? How would I like this to affect me? How would I like to bring this forwards? If there's a misalignment, if you don't want the same things, I feel like that is a point where parting can be an option. But if you do want the same things, then you just need to find a way to manage that particular aspect of your relationship in terms of like getting yourself to that destination, not necessarily a destination, but on that path of where you want to go down. I think it's really important. I feel like it's something you learn with maturity and with age. I feel like we're not taught these things in school. We're not taught, we don't see conflicts growing up necessarily. We see arguments and screaming. We see conflicts that are very difficult to handle, but we don't see the conflict resolution. We don't get the chance to look into conflict resolution as children quite often, not always, of course, but quite often. So I feel it's really important to absorb information, to learn, and to be curious and inquisitive. But maybe then if you don't have the role models to go look into, if you don't have the tools, if you don't have the studies, the education, anything like that, really be inquisitive with yourself. Okay, well, what am I wanting? And portraying that in communication to the other partner. Well, what do you want? And if I say, this is what I want, ask, how do you feel about that? Can you show up for me in this way? And if the answer is no, then we have our answer.
Definitely. And that almost leads me to intersexual dynamics, right? You break down how a female thinks she's supposed to act in a relationship versus how a male is supposed to act in a relationship, or I shouldn't even say male and female, but like, a man and a woman, whatever the case may be, whatever the relationship is. Obviously now in 2021, we have a lot more different, I would say different avenues, right? I mean, you know, it could be female, female, male, male. I know there's no uniform approach, but how would you kind of break down the best way when you think about how you can enter with the right mindset, right? How can you say, I know you said that, so the morals and values maybe have to add up, right? That's a huge part of where you're trying to go. But how can you understand where you're giving your partner and giving that other person a chance to win, right? There's still that opportunity to win. Everybody's, you know, be confident, be you, be strong, be this. And I think that's awesome. I just want to know, what do you recommend is the best way to approach giving that spouse a chance to feel like they're validated, feel like they're contributing to the relationship?
Well, it really depends on the people. So you may have heard about the different love languages. That I feel like that's a very maybe easy way to start, like recognizing what your own love language is and being able to share that with the other person as well. And the same for them. So it could be something simple like doing a simple love language test and just recognizing, okay, is the way you experience love and appreciation and affection, is that through words of affirmation, or is it touch, or is it some acts of service, or whatever it could be, and recognizing that and being sure to include that within the relationship. And I feel two people with different love languages can have a very healthy relationship as long as they're also willing to share the experience of the other person's love language, in the sense of how they feel appreciated and loved. Like for me, mine is very much like touch and appreciation and words of affirmation. If I don't receive that, I don't necessarily feel as valued as I would like to be. But it's important for me that even if my partner's is acts of service, if he is unwilling, for me it's a man, so if he is unwilling to provide the affirmations for me, I may feel insecure. But then if I also recognize that his is acts of service, as it is in this case, then I can also appreciate that when he does acts of service for me, I appreciate that that's also his way of showing love. But another thing I feel, which is universal, I would almost like to say that for every single person, if we feel seen and given the space to feel heard, I feel like that probably could be a universal answer, like giving the space for the other person to share what they're thinking and encouraging them to share, because not all of us are open and available to sharing our inner core. Like it's very difficult to speak up. Even for myself, it has been for the longest time very difficult to speak up. But if someone can provide that safe container and that safe platform for you to do so, you know, you can feel very seen and heard, and then you can have a conversation around it, and just, you know, you don't always have to agree, but you can appreciate what's happening.
That's a really key point right there, right? Me almost being able to understand that discourse is okay. And at the end of the conversation, you guys could still have a differing, you know, of opinions, but that level of respect is still there. What are some of the steps to take to address things like that in a relationship, right? Where they might seem rocky, they might be uneasy, whether it's, hey, I feel uncomfortable going to something as simple as, you know, going out to eat with, you your in-laws or something like that versus, there's something between us that I feel uncomfortable addressing. What are some steps to take that aren't confrontational, or are, if you're going to be confrontational about it, you're doing it in the right way?
Depending on the relationship you have with the person that you're going to be creating a new way with, if I want to say it that way, it's really understanding their way of communication as well as you would understand your own. I feel like really that is probably like the key thing, and what has probably been my biggest personal lesson of understanding like how I communicate and like how I can actually bring my desires to the table in a way that is, this is what I wish for, and ask the other person if they can meet me. Can you meet me here? This is what I need. This is what I want. This is what I'm longing for. Are you going to bring this? And it doesn't, if they say no, I can't do that, it doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It just means that we have different desires. And it could be that, later down the line, they would have been able to, but maybe we decide that we want this right now and it's not going to work. And that's fine. But I think really, I know it sounds really cliche and we've heard this 1,000 times before, but communication really is the key to everything, like being able to openly share and being mindful as well, not to place blame. There's a difference of saying, I need this, to saying, you never do that. Huge energetic difference. And I feel like the more we learn to voice our own needs rather than saying what we don't want, then that's really important. And that actually brings something else. I was listening to this moonology session today, and I had a conversation last week with my friend who said very similar things. And I want to share this actually here because it's such a powerful way of this lesson. So making choices based on the positive energy outcome rather than moving away from things that are negative. So when you want something to shift, moving into the direction of, well, where's the positivity rather than moving away from the negative. And I thought that was a really, really powerful switch that also happened within me when I heard that saying.
What does it take to think like that? Can you go a step further? Tell me, how do you have to approach the situation to realize that where that's going? And then how do you change that? How do you make that subtle shift?
Really, I feel there's two parts to this. There is a feeling, and I'm doing this towards my heart because I feel very much within my heart. So like really connecting to yourself and recognizing how that feels. Like, does it feel good the way you're saying and what you're saying, or is it icky? Like there's it's a very subtle thing, but you have to become intuitive with yourself, and you have to you really do actually have to know your own cues, because your body does a lot of reaction. There's a lot of different signals your body gives to you, and if you're like I was 10 years ago, very unaware of your body's signals, then you lose out on your intuition, you lose out on your touch, you lose out on your feeling. But the more in tune you can get with yourself, the more you can recognize. So yes, there's words like, you never do this. This is very obviously like a negatively energetic charged comment to say, rather than, well, this is what I desire. It's a very, very logically we can see that's very different. But if it's confusing depending on the situation and what we're talking about, then how does it feel when I say that? And how does it feel to receive what I'm receiving as well?
When you work with women now as a confidence coach, what are some of the things that you do to kind of bridge that gap of trust? Because if they're looking for you, maybe they're out of a toxic relationship, right? They just experienced that. So now that kind of constitutes the need for advice or a coach. Or they're just at the point in their life where they're looking for guidance. How do you establish that trust with them?
For me, it's very much about showing up for them and being, I don't really like to use the word leader about myself, but I do recognize that really is essentially the role I've stepped into. And I feel very, very, very humbled to be in that position where I'm someone that they find inspiration within. And I think it's really important for me to also show up, but also to show up in a very loving way, and also a very heartfelt way. So all of the things that you will read, all of the images, anything that I'm sharing, it literally comes from my soul and my heart. And I think, I could be writing something else and creating something else that isn't necessarily so connected to me. It could be more generalist. And that people feel that, even if they, by reading it, don't necessarily would know it, they feel the difference. I feel it when they read it. Because I think everything that we put out into the world, I'm going to sound a little bit extra here, but like everything we put out into the world, we charge in some different ways with energy. We charge an intention behind them. And I think it's really important if you want to show up in a way that can inspire to this deep level, with the trust that this now requires. Of course, like you mentioned I'm a confidence coach, yes, but I'm working as a sensuality empowerment coach with the confidence side of things. And sensuality is such a vulnerable position to be within. I feel like it's really important that they feel that trust towards me, of me embodying my sensuality, me being confident within my sensuality, and sharing that in a way that is all me.
That's interesting. So when you kind of take a step back, then is there an approach that you take that's consistent with each one of your clients, that you allow them to kind of look inward more? I mean, are there steps to take that you can give anybody to who's looking to build confidence in themselves, find their, that inner peace, and find their own value and self-worth? Can you give any advice to some of those people right now, some tips that you use to kind of keep yourself there?
Yeah, of course. I mean, one of the things that I have created recently is my app. So it's actually launching next week. So it's the Superwoman Alchemist app for the Turn On Superwoman. And within there are all the tools that I have used myself. And I'm also inviting all the superwomen, that I call them, to use for themselves also. So within here, it's like things that we would have all heard about, like visualizations and meditations and affirmations and mantras. But I go beyond that, because I'm a very science-based, logical human being, whilst I'm also extremely emotionally connected. So I mix both of them. Obviously, the spiritual element is there as well, but I create masterclasses as well, and we go really in depth on like topics which are very based on these things. So imposter syndrome, or sisterhood wounds, or inner child healing, or all of these things. And I think this is really where all the magic happens, when you listen to what we can call theory, and then move your way through in curiosity of finding, like, how does this material relate to me, and what healing can I find within here? Not all topics and not all things will bring you to that level of release or process or expansion, but to be fair, a lot of this stuff, it's fairly universal for a lot of us to actually go into these elements and aspects. But to support the audience right now, like how to step into confidence, I mean, I created this whole huge 4-hour masterclass on, it's actually called Step Into Your Power, and also confidence masterclass was really well received, and is still available if anyone would want it. And I have my 7 steps to confidence there, but it's like really recognizing your own worth in different ways. But I will always bring you back to this, like, get to know yourself. Because if you don't know yourself, you're going to be so influenced about everything that else is around you. And especially if you have people around you that are not your soul people that will lift you up. If you have people around you, or your environment doesn't support you, then you will absorb these things, and you won't feel good about yourself. So it's very much about recognizing your worth, and seeing your value, and being able to step into the role of what you want to do. And knowing as well, this is another little thing that's been important for me as a person, to recognize that whatever ideas I had, any ideals I had, any values I had, any paths I thought I was on, they can change in an instant, and that's okay. And allowing yourself to shift through them. So whatever story you're on right now, it doesn't have to be your story tomorrow.
I think that's really, 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 really valuable, right? You talk about where you start, not having to be where you finish. I think for a lot of people, and for various reasons, I'm sure, that are absolutely, adequate, they set these limited beliefs on themselves that, right, inhibit their growth, or kind of put that ceiling there, whether it's because the people around them never have taken that jump, or because they don't have somebody to go out and look for. You provide that for them. Charlotta, where can people go to learn more about you, what you're doing now, your app, your masterclass, all that good stuff?
Thank you. So I'm most active on Instagram. So at Charlotta Barman. You'll find me there under the alias of Creator of Superwomen, and all of my stuff is there. So my app is in all of the app stores. They're actually already there. In my Instagram, you'll find my Facebook pages and my website and everything. But Instagram is the place where I am, and you can find me in my DMs, of course.
What is one thing that you wish you would have known, that you've learned now, that you think would be really, really useful for anyone who's in a relationship or friendship, and there's that conflict or anything like that? What is one thing right now that you think would be really valuable, that you wish you would have known years ago, that would have helped you?
There's so many things. But the one thing I'm thinking now, the world is full of beautiful people. And when you're open and available to them energetically, they can bring you so much beauty as well into your life. And I feel I'm saying that from on the basis of a lot of conversations I've had, especially this year. There's been a lot of breakups, there's been a lot of breakdowns of relationships, there's been a lot of crazy stuff happening in this realm. And I'm saying this based on a lot of the conversations I've had, in the sense of, people often say, well, this was my soulmate, I'm never going to meet someone like them again. And I'm like, well, kind of that's the point, you want to meet someone who will choose you. But what I'm meaning here is that when you are available and open, you will be able to find the people around you. So you will be able to always find someone that will fulfill you. And one of the things that I have recognized to be a very, very strong point is a lot of my clients and friendships, I'm now in my mid-30s, and a lot of people within my sisterhoods and everywhere, they've been stuck. And I was also, for a very long time, I was stuck in this narrative that I would meet my soulmate, my man, as a teenager, like my parents had done, and I would be with him until I die. Well, that obviously hasn't happened. I've been in a toxic relationship. I've been in another toxic relationship. I'm now in a new relationship. Like, things change and things shift. And I think it's really important to give yourself that grace of knowing, well, just because it didn't happen the way that you did, you can drop that narrative and create a new narrative from where you are in this point right now, and not get stuck. Because I do experience a lot of people, they sit in a lot of pain for it not turning out the way they had expected it to, and forgetting to live right now. And I think that's really important, to take it from today and right now is your starting point for anything.
So it's almost like that self-punishment in some way, right? Because they're no
Yeah.
longer kind of willing to move past what they initially anticipated for what might actually be and for
Yeah.
what is.
Or a sadness or a grief of something that didn't turn out the way they expected. So it's a loss because they've envisioned this life with a person and now it's not happening. So it's like a processing or a grief that they're not letting go.
Is it like that person that they're with, or is it more on them because they're not willing to kind of adjust to what else this person has to offer?
Well, I think that we're all in control of ourselves and we can only look within. So I really think it's whoever is experiencing that particular scenario or anything else, I feel like it's on us, like it's on whoever is experiencing that. It's our responsibility to release the things that we want to release. If you would be happy to stay with that grief and that longing of something that is no longer available to you because you're now 35 and you're not 17 anymore, when you thought that you would meet your partner and stay with them forever, then if you're happy staying like that, then fine. But I really sincerely don't think that people are okay staying like that and having a fulfilled life. They need to release it.
Definitely. Charlotta, tell me, what is the kind of impact you want to have on the world and on the industry that you currently work in when it's all said and done?
That's really beautiful and something that I really look into every day, because I do really want to show up in a very heartfelt way, as I mentioned. And it was kind of like a bit of a fluke that I stepped into this role as well. This wasn't something I had planned. It's something that I just started and it became natural. So for me, my biggest burning fire is to get everyone, and I've said women, but it really is about everyone. It's not just exclusive to women, but everyone to feel so deeply connected to themselves so they can be fully expressive within themselves. And the way I do it, so with my work, I use sensuality as that, because sensuality is something that flows through us with everything that we're doing. And I feel like sensuality is also like a fun it's a fun route to go down. I feel very embodied in my sensuality, so it comes natural to me to use this as a teaching. So for me, it's very much around finding that sensation of belonging, for supporting people finding that sensation of belonging in themselves, in communities, in the world, and feeling joyful and turned on as they're living through life. And I'm not meaning turn on like sexually, I'm meaning turn on like just excited and being able to marvel at the world, because it really is a beautiful place.
Most definitely. And I saw you commented on, one of my videos for the new, motivational series that I'm putting out there.
Yeah, so
One of
great.
the things that I think was so big about that video is this idea of change. And I think you're hinting at that, right? Or alluding to that in some facet here, which is just the unknown. I think that is the most scary for everyone when you're talking about leaving a relationship, right? It's why most stay where they're at. There's that comfort feeling because they already know what that, for lack of a better term, that hell looks like, right? They already know what that dark place is. And so it may get rougher for a little while if they leave before it gets good again. And so they're not willing to take that chance. Is there kind of something that you can leave the audience with, whether they're younger women, younger men, they can kind of learn this, right? I know high school, college is a time when you're learning a lot about yourself, right? You didn't find this out till late 20s. I know that myself, I didn't find this out till my 20s. What is something you can give some of those younger viewers here that might be able to give them a sense of self-worth that they can kind of look at for themselves?
I really want each and every person to find the excitement of what the possibilities are. Being able, like, just because something dies, as in, let's say, a relationship dies off, imagine all that space that creates for something new to be birthed. And I think when you start looking at it that way, like the allowing that spaciousness to take form and seeing what new you can fill it with, not in the sense of filling a void, but rather than filling it with something fresh, something exciting. And that could be anything. It doesn't have to be any relationship necessarily, but it can be. And just knowing that you are in control. So you have all the options of creating your environment, creating your life around you in the way that you desire. Yes, there are massive factors all around us all the time, but you can still choose which factors you focus on and what you can bring in. And I think that for me has been, because I've been a serial relationship fiend, in the sense that I've barely ever been single, but the times that I have been single, especially in my recent years, it's been, I haven't had that darkness. Like I want closeness, and I want to have the touch, and I want to have everything like that. So in that sense, that's maybe the hardest thing, but also I've had that excitement of knowing that now I have the spaciousness to create, and it just brings that excitement. So finding that excitement of creating again. And I'm not meaning creating like painting or anything, creating your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to get your thought on this, because I think this is something too, as somebody who works in the field. What is Tinder, Bumble, and these social dating apps? What is that doing to the emotional connection and being able to, again, just really connect on any kind of level here, spiritually, even physically, intimately, whatever the case may be, with somebody else? What do you think that's doing when it comes to relationships? And how has that changed the way you kind of go about how you think about things?
Well, I feel like we're kind of coming out at the back end of all of these now. I think we had a bit of a peak where we lost the emotional connection for a while, but I feel like that's probably going to stay that way. And I feel like the apps are going to be changing in terms of, like, we already recognizing that a lot of people, they're choosing to be off the apps because they want human interaction and human connection, like outside of a device. So I feel like we're at a back end of all of this now. But if we're going back maybe 5 years, it was very much that we lost the sensation of connection on a deeper maybe level, where there is eye contact and there is longer physical connections and that. But I feel like we're growing out of it a bit. It's not as important to a lot of us anymore. I definitely think it did impact us really badly at the time. I feel like they definitely have their purpose. I feel like these apps definitely have their place and they have their purpose. But if you choose to use it, it may not be for the same reasons as you would when they opened up 15, 20 years ago. I don't actually know, 10 years ago, whenever they opened. So I feel like the reason has maybe changed a bit, and there will be new ways, again, digital ways to meet people that will have that more authentic side to it potentially coming in.
How has COVID played a role in that? The pandemic itself kind of keeping people, again, at a distance. 'Cause I think that was the only concern. I think, when I go and I look at some of the younger people. I actually was playing basketball with a buddy of mine yesterday, and a 15-year-old kid came up and he asked for relationship advice. Now, I'm more than happy to, entertain that and kind of give him whatever advice I can give him there. But one of the things that I found that was different that almost at 23, I'm not that far removed from being 15. And I felt like he was almost living a different life than I lived, with this idea, like, just some of the things he was telling me. And do you feel like now, with the pandemic and the way it is, that it kind of maybe has slowed that process to come out of that back end with some of these dating apps and kind of re-influence this idea of, all right, well, if I'm just going to sit here, I might as well?
Yes, I feel like it is a very personal choice, though, like what you're okay with, and it can also become an addiction. So I mean, potentially, yes, the pandemic
How so? Stay with that. I want to hear that.
Well, with anything that we do on longer periods of time, anything that we do to distract ourselves or to avoid something else or to get hits of euphoria for whatever reason that could be, like attention or any affirmation, anything that comes through, like that can become very addictive, because we all know the dopamine, everything that happens with a like or with any connection, someone seeing you, that is very addictive. So in that sense, where would you like me to take it? I have a lot of things to say on this. Where would you like me to take it with
Any way, any which way. I'm open for all.
Right. So it's really easy to become addicted to something, however simple it could be, like an app in this way. Because it gives you that instant gratification, like Instagram would, or like a Facebook like would, or I don't know if you use Facebook so much, you're so much younger than I am, but it's a similar, in the similar sensation of when someone likes your thing or comments on something. So we get that hit of gratification. So I think it's very easy to do so. And maybe with COVID, we've had a lot of new apps coming into play as well, with similar like gamification apps type things. They provide a similar sensation. So in that sense, they can also become very addictive. So it's not necessarily about the relationship apps. It could be anything that gives you some type of satisfaction or distraction.
And what do you think that does by developing that over time? What do you think that does to your ability to actually have a relationship?
This is not exclusive to everyone, of course, but I would think that what it can do, one of the causes and one of the effects that we are seeing is that it's difficult to create a safe container for natural connection, because suddenly you are two people in the same space and you can't choose when you're responding necessarily. You can't choose when you remove yourself. You're there in that present moment, and if you're not accustomed to that or used to that, it can feel very uncomfortable. We know even before internet, before COVID, when I was a kid, when I was a young teenager, you can still be very shy, and that's part of life. You're meeting people, you're interacting with people all the time, but you can still be very shy and feel closed off. So imagine then if you've never had these experiences, how that would be. So putting yourself in a room with someone, trying to have a date or whatever, a conversation, that can feel really daunting, really, really daunting.
I want to almost leave them with that positive note, and that comes back to, right, this idea of then understanding your self-worth. Because when you enter that app, if you choose to go on Tinder, if you choose to go on Bumble, whatever the case may be, Hinge, all these different apps, you have then an approach, right? It's I'm looking for this. This is why I'm here, right? I'm not necessarily looking for validation or approval from other people like I can get on, like you said, on Facebook or Instagram, but almost like I know what I bring to the table, and if somebody wants to meet me on here that's halfway and looking for the same thing, I'll entertain it. If not, I don't need this, right? And I think so.
Yeah.
So having that understanding going into it, I think, is really, really important, especially at a young age too, when you don't have all this experience to kind of go off of. Just to have that mindset would be a huge step in the right direction. Charlotta, thank you so much for joining us here. I really appreciate all of the content that you helped create here, and the positivity that you bring in. Love what you do, love what you're about. And I think, the one big thing that I would take away here, is that find that sense of self-worth, right? Find who you are, what you want. It's easy. I think a lot of people talk about, well, I just want to make money and everything will be okay. I just want to get fit and everything will be okay. I just want to get an attractive girl or an attractive guy and everything will be okay. But it's about working on yourself, right? If you put yourself in a position to be successful, all of this stuff, believe it or not, as cliche as this may sound, it will flow to you, because you'll start to attract those things just by, what you bring to the table and how everybody sees you're not dependent on anyone else for your happiness. You're your own source of your happiness. Guys, thank you so much. Charlotta, again, this was awesome. I'd love to in the future one day when you're not traveling. I know I want to do this with other people I've had on the show too, in person, sit down, do a one-on-one would be awesome. So
That'd be amazing. Thank you so much, Ari. I really appreciate your time. You're amazing.
definitely. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you. You too. Thank you.